Good day. We're here with Ramayya Krishnan, the 2019 Informs President. Thanks so much for joining us today. And let's start by telling us a little bit more about yourself, kind of what you're up to these days, and about your years as president. I know you were one of our more recent ones, so I'd love to hear a little bit more.
Thanks, Anne and Kara. I'm a professor, a longtime professor at Carnegie Mellon University. I'm currently the dean of the Heinz College of Information Systems and Public Policy. And I also lead a center that is called the Block Center for Technology and Society. So that's what I'm currently doing at Carnegie Mellon. You asked about my year as president. It's been a fantastic experience, both as president-elect and as president, and now as past president.
Anne mentioned you're one of our more current presidents. Your presidency year was just 2019. Can you tell us what the dynamics of OR, MS, and analytics were at that time?
Thanks, Kara. The interesting dynamics were actually threefold. First and foremost, I think I came in at a time when countries, large government agencies, and companies were all announcing investments in AI and AI strategies. And a closer look at those AI strategies demonstrated that they encompassed a large part of what we, the OR and analytics community, viewed as operations research and analytics. So AI was no longer just about machine learning or about sensing. It was actually about decision making as well. So my concern was that we as a community had to understand where the opportunities were for cross-fertilizing what it was that was going on in AI with what was going on at Informs, but equally well, engage in a set of activities that really improved and increased awareness in the outside of what we as a community brought to the table. So that was one of the drivers. A second important driver was that there was very large and significant funding by NSF of AI. However, at the same time, the funding for operations research was close to non-existent. So this is again a signal of the fact that the importance of our contributions had to be recognized, and the investments by NSF and other federal agencies had to be made in this community that is developing methods and tools that was actually contributing to the success of the AI strategy that was being outlined by government agencies and by companies. And the third element was that in addition to AI, there were significant other efforts in data science that were taking place from statistics, from computer science, and we had to be active participants in this conversation. So these were the dynamics that then led me to appoint a strategy committee that was going to devise and develop a strategy, which we really focused on and did an amazing job along with the board and very many members of our community to develop an AI strategy for Informs.
Wow, that was certainly a lot going on, and I can say I've experienced many of those conditions myself. Can you tell us of all of the things that you embarked on over the last year as Informs President? What are you most proud of accomplishing during your tenure?
I think there were two key elements, I think. One was a concrete one, and that had to do with the launch of our Informs Journal on data science. I think that came out during my term as president, and I think it certainly puts a stake in the ground of Informs' take on data science, which is important. Second, I think, is the articulation of that AI strategy led to a set of activities that are underway this year, for instance, with NSF, where there's a proposal to the CCC, which is the computing consortium of the NSF, to create agenda-setting workshops that would bring members of the AI community and the OR community together to set an agenda which will then hopefully lead to not only really interesting sets of research initiatives, but the funding to go along with that would benefit members of our community. Finally, the third piece is really increasing advocacy with both the House and the Senate AI committees. There are, by the way, committees that are led by senators and congressmen and congresswomen on AI, and advocating to them about what it is we bring to the table. The same was done with the Office of Science and Technology Policy. So I think this advocacy efforts, I think, were an important aspect. And our efforts in DC to create this policy conference and engaging with the world in DC to actually increase brand awareness of what it is we were doing was building on what my predecessor did, but I think actually built on that effort to further improve our brand awareness.
Thank you. As we celebrate the 25th anniversary of Informs, where do you think Informs and the profession in general are headed in the next 25 years, and what would be one piece of advice you have to get us there?
You know, if you reflect on the times that we are in today, operations research was born during World War II, and we are in the midst of another war, if you will, the pandemic. And what's been remarkable, and this comes from my own experience leading the CMU task force, helping the governor of Pennsylvania in recovery and reopening, how relevant what it is we do, operations research and analytics, is to addressing these humongous societal problems that have come to the fore on account of the pandemic. So I think one of the key elements of the pandemic has to do with understanding why, for instance, supply chains have been under stress in quite the way they have. And I think our community has the opportunity to create not only compelling solutions to problems, but also create things much like after the financial crisis, there were things like stress tests for banks. Could we imagine stress tests for supply chains that could be made available not only for firms to evaluate their supply chains, but equally well for states and for countries to evaluate how resilient their supply chains are to stress? And I use that as one example to point out the future of OR and analytics is going to be bright if we are really engaged and embedded in the real problems that need solving. And to the extent that we have the symbiosis between methods and problems, and how we take new methods to solve problems, and how problems drive the development of new methods, and you have this back and forth, and that requires us to be an organization, a community of academics, practitioners, and scholars all working effectively together. I think our future is very bright, and we really do have an opportunity on account of this global pandemic to really demonstrate to the world what value we bring to the table.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing us and for joining us today.